Good evening, you're watching World News Tonight on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Making money on war crimes may damage your brand. That's the message from Poland's Foreign Minister to Elon Musk amid allegations tonight that Starlink is being used by Russian forces in Ukraine. More on this developing story in just a moment. But first, the latest headlines. Keir Starmer keeps up Europe's charm offensive in China. The Baltics crack down on Russia's shadow fleet. And the Polish złoty booms in the face of US dollar crash. Poland's top diplomat Radosław Sikorski is accusing the richest man in the world of, quote, making money on war crimes. It comes as reports emerge that Elon Musk's Starlink satellites are not just being used by Kyiv, but also by Russia to target Ukrainian civilians. Kazimierz Wysiak reports.
Starlink satellites have been a game changer in the war in Ukraine. Unlimited internet access is crucial for uninterrupted communication for Ukrainians, but there is growing concern that the Russians have started using it too. According to Ukrainian NGO Inform Napalm, Russians used Starlink in the latest drone attack on a passenger train, killing at least 5 civilians. Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski has since called out the man behind the attack, US billionaire Elon Musk.
Hey, big man Elon Musk, why don't you stop the Russians from using Starlinks to target Ukrainian cities? Making money on war crimes may damage your brand.
The owner of the X platform was quick to lash out in response.
This drooling imbecile doesn't even realise that Starlink is the backbone of Ukrainian military communications.
But the government in Warsaw is more than aware of Starlink's significance for Ukraine. After all, Poland is paying for most of them. Poland has so far supplied at least 24,500 Starlink dishes to Kyiv, around half of Ukraine's entire stock. It is also paying more than $50 million a year for the service. According to TVP World's editor-in-chief, this is proof that Elon Musk could easily switch off Russian-used Starlinks if he wanted to.
If Poland didn't pay for that, for subscription, it would be switched off. So somebody is paying for this subscription over Russia territory and or occupied territories of Ukraine by Russia. No way it's, secret for him.
And Russia using US equipment is apparently not limited to Starlinks alone. Republican Senator Joe Wilson warns that Moscow has been purchasing components for air defense from the US-based Rogers Corporation.
These systems allow Russia to defend against Ukrainian strikes, operate further from the front lines, protect war-fighting infrastructure and, in the case of the S-500, undermine Western deterrence.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is also displeased with the West allowing Russia to import crucial war components through third countries.
But wouldn't it be cheaper and easier to just cut Russia off from the components it needs for missiles production, or even destroy the factories making them?
The latest findings on Russia using American equipment come at a time of intense fighting in Ukraine and a push from Europe, Kyiv and Washington to finalize a peace deal. Russia has so far responded with more strikes against civilians. For TVP World, Kazimierz Wysiak.
India and the European Union have penned a first-ever defence and security pact, with the bloc trying to lure New Delhi away from Russian-made military supplies. The agreement has landed in the same breath as a mega trade deal that slashes tariffs on European-made cars and wine, and as leaders head to China to beef up ties with Xi Jinping. Europe correspondent Alex Cadier reports from Brussels.
Well, it's been a vertigo-inducing couple of weeks for European countries since those threats from Donald Trump of more tariffs against countries that did not in some way accept his annexation or acquisition of Greenland. We have seen the European Union striking a trade deal with India, getting closer with that side of the world. We now have the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, being the first UK leader in years to visit Beijing. Here is why.
And so what we're doing here is engaging and building a comprehensive consistent, stable, strategic approach to China, which is much needed, has huge opportunities. And for me, the most important thing, as ever, is to be absolutely determined that this will deliver back into the United Kingdom.
So the European Union and the UK, two entities that historically have stayed close to the United States, have relied on the United States for security, have relied on the United States for trade, are now looking elsewhere. Now the question as to why was answered on TVP World's Wider View programme by Joe Barnes from the Daily Telegraph.
I don't think we've ever seen a push, a genuine sort of mindset where people think actually we're going to need to be independent of America. And this includes the Canadians as well, because of various reasons. But actually, Davos, I think, has been that moment where we are actually seeing maybe people thinking we need to go.
So that gathering in the Swiss Alps may have been a turning point for Europe, for the UK, for the priorities in this new geopolitical world where the United States is seen by so many in Europe as a less reliable partner, as one that will put tariffs on its partners, on its historic allies. Therefore, Europe turns to India for a trade deal. Keir Starmer puts his best foot forward in China to see if he can improve that relationship. We've even seen the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney doing the same thing. It is a completely different way for European powers to present themselves in the world. All of that, the Trump effect. In Brussels, I'm Alex Cadier for TVP World.
A group of European coastal nations are delivering a coordinated rebuke of Russia's shadow fleet, warning that ships sailing in the Baltic and North Sea under multiple flags may be treated as stateless vessels. This, as NATO's former Supreme Allied Commander in Europe speaks exclusively to TVP World, warning that Russia is running amok in Eastern Europe. John Todd has more.
These pictures show the French Navy seizing a suspected so-called shadow fleet tanker last week.
French Navy.
Troops stormed the bridge as the ship sailed the Mediterranean. The Grinch was under sanctions, flying a false Comorian flag and carrying 730,000 barrels of Russian oil. Now it's a scene that could be repeated in the Baltic, after Poland and 13 other Baltic and North Sea states said in a joint letter they will use maritime law to take aim at Moscow's aging shadow fleet.
General Breedlove, thank you.
Former NATO Supreme Allied Commander Europe, General Philip Breedlove, told TVP World News Director Adam Yasser that Russia is undeterred by empty threats.
Russia is running amok in Eastern Europe. We say that we're going to put sanctions and things on Russia and change their behavior, and it has not worked.
The shadow fleet are underinsured, often poorly maintained tankers that are used to circumvent Western sanctions and fuel the Kremlin's war machine. At least 11 Baltic undersea cables have been damaged since late 2023, some of which have been linked to these vessels. Experts say the 14 states will only reap the benefits if they take effective action and seize suspected ships.
It very much depends on how decisive and determined NATO countries are in their activities, in their countermeasures. If they are strict enough and hawkish enough, it's quite likely that Russia, will be pressed to stop in its activities.
Experts warn, though, that international law prevents military units from destroying the ships after seizure.
You can search, you can arrest the crew, but you cannot try to sink it or you cannot put a fire on it. You cannot destroy it.
That hasn't stopped Ukraine, which claims to have used long-range drones to take out Russia's rogue ships. John Todd for TVP World.
And we'll have Adam Yasser's full exclusive interview with General Breedlove right after World News Tonight. It's been 8 years since the Polish złoty held its own so strongly in the face of the US dollar. But as Maciej Wylowski reports, there's one man who's brushing off the fall of his country's currency, US President Donald Trump.
Poland's currency, the złoty, hasn't been this strong compared to the US dollar in close to 8 years. On Wednesday, $1 was worth roughly 3.5 złotys. That ratio stood at more than 4-to-1 at the same time last year. A combination of interest rate cuts by the Federal Reserve, concerns over the central bank's independence, and erratic White House decisions on trade and foreign policy have all contributed to broad-based dollar sell-off.
In this specific circumstance, the American volatility of the fiscal policy, volatility of trade policy, volatility of monetary policy is weakening the dollar against all currencies.
But U.S. President Donald Trump doesn't seem concerned.
No, I think it's great. I mean, the value of the dollar, look at the business we're doing. No, dollar's doing great.
A weaker dollar makes U.S. exports cheaper and more competitive abroad, making the White House's strategy to eliminate the trade deficit easier to pull off.
The overall White House strategy is to be an export country. So to decrease the deficit to almost zero and to have a surplus in terms of trade.
Dollar weakness has been another factor boosting the price of gold, a safe haven asset which tends to move inversely to the currency. On Wednesday, the yellow metal hit a new record high above $5,300 an ounce. It's not just the dollar that's losing ground to the złoty. Poland's currency is also gaining vis-a-vis the euro as the country's economy has consistently outpaced the eurozone.
Poland is outperforming its peers and in general outperforming other major EU economies, and this is generating a lot of positive returns for investors.
But a stronger currency has its drawbacks. In the same way a weaker dollar boosts U.S. exporters, a stronger złoty harms Polish firms with a foreign presence. But it's good news for Polish tourists spending their money abroad. U.S. volatility, coupled with strong growth at home, could give the złoty's rally further room to run. Maciej Wilowski for TVP World.
After almost 18 months of anti-government demonstrations in Serbia, protesters are not letting up. In fact, as President Aleksandar Vučić says, snap elections are bound to be held this year. Students are ready to put themselves on the ballot, a move that many polls show could seriously threaten Vučić and his government. Paweł Trzaskowski explains.
Last night, on Serbia's most important church holiday, crowds once again took to the streets to join anti-government protests.
I am here tonight because for the past year and a half we have been fighting daily, and today we are marking St. Sava's Day, the patron saint of Serbia, and we expect this fight to come to an end.
Knowledge is power was the slogan of this particular demonstration, and not to Saint Sava, the patron saint of education, but also to the students themselves, who started the protest movement more than a year ago. The protests started after a concrete canopy of a newly renovated railway station in Novi Sad collapsed, tragically killing 16 people. The incident sparked public outrage, with state capture and corruption cited as the reason for the collapse. The movement proved to be the greatest challenge to the country's president Aleksandar Vučić since he came to power in 2012. Mass, continuous protests eventually forced Vučić to bow down to one of the protesters' demands and call for snap elections. They are scheduled to be held this year, with student lists on the ballots.
The students are showing tonight that they are actually the strongest political force in Serbia today. They are stronger than the opposition parties, and of course they are also stronger than Aleksandar Vučić's ruling parties.
Some polls support this claim. For example, the student list is given a lead over the ruling parties in a poll conducted for the renowned Serbian watchdog CRTA. This despite the fact that the students have yet to nominate their candidates, who are not supposed to be students themselves.
They will present the list of candidates, which will be made of professors, lawyers, athletes, people from different social groups who supported them in the last year and a half.
And the backing for the movement is still strong, with 58% of respondents supporting the protests in the same poll. But these results also reveal a deep division in Serbian society, with large numbers of respondents decisively opposing the protests.
It seems like Serbia is kind of split in two halves, which to some extent remind us the last years of Slobodan Milosevic rule back in the 90s, where you could live a completely normal life, more or less normal, if you are part of the regime and you have specific conditions, and you could be targeted on daily basis if you belong to the other half of society.
Slobodan Milosevic, the long-time Yugoslav and Serbian leader, was eventually ousted from the presidency in 2000 after the events known as the October 5th Revolution, the protests that erupted following a snap election. Aleksandar Vučić was then the Minister of Information. Now, as president, he is going to find out for himself whether history truly repeats itself. Paweł Trzaskowski for TVP World.
From leaked text messages to claims of blackmail, a political storm is erupting over a failed ministerial appointment in the Czech Republic. The country's president, Petr Pavel, who steadfastly backs NATO and Ukraine, has already been at odds with the country's new right-wing government. And Prime Minister Andrej Babiš now appears to face a choice: double down or risk losing his parliamentary majority. Our correspondent Andrew Sweeney reports.
Leaked messages and accusations of blackmail highlight a widening rift at the heart of Czech politics. President Petr Pavel accused Foreign Minister Petr Matsenka of trying to blackmail him over his refusal to appoint fellow motorist MP and accused Nazi sympathiser Filip Turek as Environment Minister.
Macinka's statements are not only an illustration of the government's approach to sharing power in our constitutional order, but also proof that key issues of our foreign and security policy have become hostages to personal animosities and interests.
In short, it is, on one side, a power play between the cabinet of Andrej Babiš and specifically parts of the cabinet that belong to the quite a radical wing of motorist party. So clearly they also want to make the fuzz in the public opinion. They want to attract attention and have these fierce comments in order to build up emotional base for their support in the Czech Republic.
Matsenka also condemned Pavel for interfering with foreign policy over Ukraine. The president has maintained consistent support for Kiev and NATO. Support for Ukraine remains strong in the Czech Republic, with 4 million being raised by members of the public to buy generators for Kiev. Matsenka's motorists are out of step with popular sentiment.
The minority parties that almost no one in the Czech Republic voted for, those motorists and the SPD, have been given absolutely inordinate amount of power.
Pavel, however, is highly popular in the Czech Republic. According to a poll published by EDNS, 58% of Czechs approve of his presidency. Only 22% instead trusted Parliament. According to President Pavel's advisor Jiří Pehe, Prime Minister Andrej Babiš is stuck. He wants good relations with the president, but relies on the motorists for a parliamentary majority.
Pavel is working within the framework of his powers, especially within foreign policy. Pavel and Babiš are not in a power struggle per se. Babiš would like to have good relations with the president. He needs him to maintain a good reputation in European politics, but he's pushed into conflict by the motorists.
Babiš now faces a stark choice: support Matsenka and risk damaging his reputation in Europe and the Czech Republic, or risk his majority in Parliament. For TVP World, Andrew Sweeney.
We return now to our top stories: the spat over Starlink and Europe's courting of the global south. And joining me now for an exclusive interview is Daniel Fried, former US Ambassador to Poland. Good evening to you, Mr. Ambassador.
Good evening.
So Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski is accusing Elon Musk of, quote, making money on war crimes by allowing Russian forces to use his Starlink satellite system in Ukraine. Should, in your mind, such valuable Western technology be kept out of Russian hands, or is Musk simply doing business?
Well, U.S. policy for some years has been to deny Russia access to high technology. That was the Biden administration policy, and Trump has not reversed it. In fact, he has continued it. So the notion that the U.S. would in any way do anything to support Russia's war machine or its high-tech sector seems to run counter to U.S. interests. Now, Elon Musk's Starlink has been critical for Ukraine, and Elon Musk points that out all the time. Elon Musk has picked a fight with Minister Sikorski, and that Elon Musk is probably ill-advised to do so, but that's his style. He picks fights. In any event, the issue is policy toward Russia, and to achieve President Trump's goal of a sustainable peace in Russia, the U.S. and Europe are going to have to increase the pressure on Russia, and we have the tools to do it. That's where we should be focusing our attention.
Now, of course, these are just allegations, although from verifiable reports and sources. But to be clear, do you believe Mr. Musk, the richest man in the world, if this Starlink technology is being used, that he's aiding and abetting Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine?
I would say that all U.S. companies who sell high-tech products in the world need to do the proper due diligence to make sure it doesn't fall into Russia's hands. This is just good policy. And I don't need to go any farther than that. I don't think Elon Musk or anybody gets an exception.
If we can take a broader brush tonight, Mr. Ambassador, we've got the EU striking a trade deal with India. We've got the South American Mercosur agreement up in the air, and we've got Xi Jinping welcoming leader after leader to Beijing. Is Europe hedging its bets in the face of Donald Trump?
Well, the EU-India trade deal was years in the making. So Donald Trump didn't create this, but he may have spurred it on. The fact is,
It stalled for some time, Mr. Ambassador, didn't it? Donald Trump turbocharged the progress.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. And it's also fair to say that if President Trump continues to use tariffs as an all-purpose tool on any issue that's uppermost in his mind, you will see a reaction. And I think that won't serve anybody's interest. Now, I hope that Europe deepens its ties with fellow democracies rather than deepening its ties with China. I think that Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney's speech in Davos was powerful, and he had a reason for it. But I think the outreach to China on trade, on easing Chinese exports of electric cars to Canada is not a great sign. Either middle powers defend the rules-based order, or they cut deals with authoritarian and potentially predatory powers. Really, they can't do both. And so I would like to see Europe, as it chooses how to respond to whatever it is we want to call Trump's foreign policy, chooses to remain true to its own best values, because a values-based foreign policy is actually not charity, it's a higher realism.
You know me so well, Mr. Ambassador, because I was just going to ask you about Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney's comments to Davos last week. The old world order is gone, is what he said, and that middle powers must act together, because if they're not at the table, they're on the menu. Are we, in your mind, seeing these growing middle powers, including India, say to the United States, well, if you push us away, if you blitz us with tariffs, we'll cash in elsewhere?
I'm trying to look for a happy ending to whatever it is we're going through. And a better ending, or a happy ending, also depends on Europe, Canada, other countries stepping up and doing more for the sake of the free world and its values. The U.S., one of the complaints that Trump has that has validity is that European powers have not done enough. And they're beginning to get that message and do more. In my view, President Trump should take yes for an answer and take the win. But until the United States does, European powers should step up more. Now, I think intellectually and strategically, Prime Minister Tusk and Foreign Minister Sikorski are ready for this. I also think that President Novotny's efforts to keep working with the Trump administration and working with Trump world is well advised. That is, Poland is well regarded by everybody in Washington. It's got nothing but friends, and it can use that political capital to good purpose.
Very briefly on that, do you worry that Poland will, despite those good relationships, still be caught up in the increasing distance that America wants to have to NATO's eastern flank?
Well, one area of Trump foreign policy, which I think could work out well, is the offer of security backstopping for Ukraine. Secretary of State Marco Rubio today in Congress affirmed that the United States will back up the European forces, the coalition of the willing, inside Ukraine. Now, that's a very big deal. And President Trump has not withdrawn forces from Poland. President Trump likes Poland. Trump world likes Poland. They consider Poland to be a model ally. So Poland has something to work with. And I think Polish diplomacy has handled the Trump administration pretty well. So Poland, yes, it's true that Poland might face difficult choices, Europe versus the United States, but I think there is a place for Poland to be both a strong European power, one of the major countries in the EU, and a country with close ties to the United States in general and to Trump world in particular. Look, doing both at the same time is what diplomats get paid to do. And I think Polish diplomacy, Polish leadership is perfectly capable of doing this. Despite the political differences between the government and the presidency, both are capable, both know the United States well. So I think this is doable, and this is a good role for Poland.
Mr. Ambassador, I want to end with a consideration I've had across the course of the day preparing for our discussion, because when I think about Donald Trump and where we are today, internationally, he's failed to find peace in Ukraine. He's appearing to back down over the likes of Greenland, or at least using force there. Domestically, there's the ICE shooting of Alex Pretty. Is Donald Trump losing control of his agenda? I mean, has he opened too many fronts?
An excellent question. The American people elected Donald Trump, and one of the things they elected him on was his promise to control the border. He won that argument. They also elected him on a promise to avoid endless foreign wars. He won that argument too. But in the last couple of weeks, we have seen the U.S. threaten aggression against Greenland. That's just shocking to me. And more to the point, the American people didn't like it. The American people also don't like the behavior of ICE in Minneapolis. It appears ill-disciplined and trigger-happy, beating up people and shooting them, and then simply lying about it, calling the person who was killed a domestic terrorist, or saying he was preparing to shoot ICE agents. The American people aren't accepting this. And President Trump may be retreating. The fact is, American society is still the society that Poles know and have worked with. And our politics is not at an end. Much depends on how the Trump administration winds up and who succeeds it in the next elections. It's going to be a rough ride, and it is particularly rough for those of us who live here and watch the United States burn through a lot of accumulated political capital for no particularly good reason. But there are a lot of Republicans who maintain a Reaganite view, a pro-free world view of American strategy. The Democrats do, by and large. So there is a reasonable hope that when we get through whatever it is we're going through in the United States, we will end up in pretty good shape and possibly with a stronger Europe as a more equal partner. That's the optimistic variant. I understand that it's optimistic, but my job as a diplomat was to look for the path forward, the best one, no matter how narrow, how steep, and rough. Find that path forward and take it.
And it is always a pleasure to hear you articulate that path forward. Daniel Fried, former US Ambassador to Poland, thank you as always for your time.
Thanks for having me.
And that's all for World News tonight. But don't go anywhere. On the Record with Adam Yasser is next. I'm Aaron Darman. Good night.